In this episode of Behind the Score, we're taking a look at a recent documentary I scored called Bluff City Chinese. This is part one of a two-part series, and today we're hearing right from the film's director. I asked her to give honest insight into what directors are really looking for when hiring a composer, how they navigate complex, full-budget productions, and what makes a composer somebody that they want to work with again and again. If you're an aspiring composer, this is the perspective you almost never get to hear. If you don't mind, maybe like introducing yourself, kind of just telling a little bit about who you are, what you do. I know you do many things outside of just, directing and, kind of working with other filmmakers as well.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Thandi Cai, and I'm a filmmaker, but I'm also a graphic designer and an artist. I also see myself as a cultural organizer, and film is one of the great mediums that helps me do that work.
So what is Bluff City Chinese about? And then also, why do you feel like it was important to tell that story?
So Bluff City Chinese is a film about the Chinese American immigrant history in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's told through the lens of an intergenerational friendship between myself and one of my mentors, Emerald Dunn, who is also an elder in the Chinese American community. And she single-handedly, outside of any institutional support, is piecing together genealogies and oral histories around this history. The reason why we made the film was because she was doing a lot of this work, like I said, alone, just using the resources that are accessible to her. When I started working with her, I realized there was a really huge need for this history to be shared, beyond the scope of what she was able to do as a single person. So we created the film to draw awareness to the fact that this history hasn't been recorded before, but there is a really vibrant and substantial community of Chinese American immigrants in Memphis. And that story is really important.
And what initially drew you to want to kind of feel like that you needed to actually create the documentary and kind of tell that story? I know that, with kind of meeting Emmy and kind of building that relationship, it was something you were passionate about. But what made you really, because it's a lot of work to get everything together, like the funding and kind of, spread the word and get a crew together and everything like that, from editors and composers and everything. But what made you want to really do the work to put in and put that package together?
Yeah, I think, I can speak from, there's a lot of layers to that question. I think I was motivated personally because I grew up in Memphis not knowing this history, and it really affected the way that I developed as a young person and an adult. It took me a while to understand that I did have a role and I did have agency in the civic engagement in my city. And I didn't get that confidence until I really started working with Emmy and learning about the history, and that I did have ancestors and there were community groups that have been in Memphis for the past 150 years. The other side of that is Emmy's research is very much based on the skills that she has, which is to say that she's of an older generation. And so a lot of her work at the time that I met her was stored in these binders, floor to ceiling shelves of binders of printouts that she had collected. And as someone who works in visual communications, I felt very urgent about that. Someday, for whatever reason, her house caught on fire, God forbid, all of that would go up in smoke.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's so wild.
Yeah, so it's like the historic preservation side of things was really a huge motivation. And then the other thing was just knowing that how much that history meant to me as an adult, trying to find my place in the world, and knowing that there were other people who also could use that empowerment.
At what stage, kind of during the creation process, did you start thinking about the role of music, and kind of what did you have in your mind as far as how you wanted that to play? I know you had kind of referenced some like playlists and things like that for me that were really kind of helpful of like helping the composer side of it kind of get a direction. But at what point did you start thinking about the role and what you wanted to put as far as like the emotional undertone for the audience?
Yeah, to be honest, I was thinking about music from the very beginning because, where the whole story is set in Memphis.
Yeah.
And this, as someone who grew up there, I knew that was going to be a really important aspect of the film. I was like, okay, I know this isn't like the main priority right now, like as we're trying to fundraise, in the early stages, I mean. But that was something that I always knew was going to be really critical to tell the story. And so I was thinking about all the textures that would be going into the storytelling. How do we capture like the essence of um, sort of the diverse tapestry of music history that converges in Memphis, while also making it culturally sensitive without being too cliche. So
Yeah.
those were some of the considerations that I was thinking about, and I feel like you and I had a really great conversation about that. But so I think this throughout the process, one of the nice things about researching music was, even though there were a lot of details that I had to work out, the music was really sort of a place where I could kind of regain the fun part of the creative process, if I could say that.
Yeah.
So I'd be on the train, for instance, and I would save albums of like singer-songwriters or musicians or composers that I thought would offer something to the project. And then I would just listen to it on the train and just really let myself sort of be absorbed by it. And that's how I created the playlist. In addition to a lot of the suggestions that our crew gave, I also was very open about that process.
So, what were some of the maybe early creative or even like production challenges that you kind of faced when you were, getting the story together, kind of forming a team and trying to get everything set up and moving forward?
Yeah, there was a lot of challenges actually. Most of it was the transference of the subject matter from team member to team member. So there is a whole trove of information that spans, like I said before, 150 years of history. So most of that lives inside of those binders and in Emmy's head. So a lot of the early production challenges was trying to figure out a way to educate myself so that I was at least somewhat on the same page as her as far as like what does this history actually look like in scope and depth. And then the next challenge was, okay, so how do we fit that into a runtime of 30 minutes to 60 minutes in a way that is accessible, where we don't bore audiences and is also emotionally compelling?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that because it's like with normal movies, you've got to decide like what is the storyline and how does it flow. But like you've got so much
Mhm.
information to put out there, and I think that people's attention spans are so low that you've got to really work to kind of keep, the narrative moving with an arc and, kind of a conclusion that works really well. And I think you guys did an amazing job on it, by the way. I think the end
Oh, thank
result is
you. Yeah,
phenomenal, but that's a lot
thank you.
to work on. Yeah. I mean, it was a really fun score to work on because it was like you said, it was like you had to try and find a way to blend elements of Memphis, like whether it was acoustic guitar or slide or whatever, with elements of maybe traditional Chinese instruments. But then again, you kind of got to watch that line where don't want it to be cliche. You want to kind of have
Right,
that cultural texture in there, but it's a nice blend and it's not just too cliche one way or the other. So I think that
right.
for me, getting those playlists or at least some kind of reference was really good. And so I think for a lot of composers, if you can get that from a director and not just kind of go in a like vague emotional direction, it really kind of helps nail it down. Just because you're 50% on the way to the same kind of spot.
The other thing too I wanted to mention, and I don't know if we'll get into this in more detail in other parts of the conversation, but we also thought a lot about like the cultural appropriation aspect of music as well. And to be completely transparent, we were looking for a Chinese American composer at the beginning, and we're searching really hard for that because, but then again, like we didn't want it to go too far in that direction either because that doesn't feel true to the story.
Yeah.
So there was that part of it was trying to find the right match. And I think at the end of the day, what I really appreciated about the process was being able to explain focuses we wanted to have in the composition, and then being able to talk to you about it. I think in a way where I felt like I was really being listened to and respected. I think that went a long way. So even though we had this goal in mind at the beginning where we wanted everyone to be Asian American, I think at the end of the day, like we had to sort of figure out how do we make the film, and that's something that I still have a lot of, I think about a lot,
Yeah,
but ultimately, I don't regret any of the decisions we made. I think we had a really, really successful, this soundtrack. People are always, like, just really it. So, I wanted to also mention that to you and
that's
really just
awesome.
express my gratitude.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I really appreciate that. I was very happy to be and proud to be a part of the project. I think it's an amazing, not just film, but just like piece of work. Like as a filmmaker, when you know that you're wanting to maybe not go with temp music and you're wanting to, or, royalty free, or maybe even AI music now is even more popular, especially for like kind of just those parts of underscore, it's not a super important, part of a film. What is your thought process when looking for a composer? How did you stumble upon me? I know we kind of ended up just, I think you got my contact info maybe from online. I never even really asked you that. So I'm actually kind of curious about
Oh,
that.
yeah, well, okay, so maybe I'll work backwards from in that question, but we found you because Sissa and I, when we really realized, like, okay, now is the time where we can actually reach out to composers and try to get something going. We were chronically in Instagram Reels. Like, I think both of our algorithms were really much in, like, the film composition, um, whatever channel that is in the
Interesting.
algorithms. Yes, but then, Sissa's really plugged into the Memphis, film community, and I think that's how she came across your content, and, what we really liked about your content is that you just go really hard on all these different styles, and we were like, "Wow, this person's, like, really has range and is clearly really passionate about what they do." And you were based in Memphis, and you were like, "Let's give this a shot. It seems like a really cool guy." A lot of the people that we got onto the team are also just people we wanted to be friends with or have connections with. So I think that also makes a really big difference when you're making
Yeah.
a really intense creative project. Um, and then I already forgot the first part of the question,
I did too,
which
and
was
that's okay. But I think you bring up a really good point, which is, that's something that I've stressed to like other composers is like, you can go through school all you want to or not. But I think it really comes down to you've got to, get into your community, make some connections, make some friends. And I think that's the hardest part. It's not like any other job. I mean, just like filmmaking, it's not like any other job where
Mhm.
you learn the trade and then it's like, okay, you've graduated. Now let's get you some work. It's like, no, now you've got to start the work and like make the connections. So I think that's a really
Right,
good
yeah.
point. Yeah, that's awesome. For composers, listening to this, is that I think it is good to really kind of express that range. I think like having a wide
Mhm,
range that you can express online and kind of put that out there. There's a large part of the composer community that is, and I'm torn on it. I get the idea, but they're like, pick a genre and pick a lane and just dive into that. Don't do anything else. Kind of be a specialist in that area.
mhm,
And it's interesting to hear you say what you say because it's like I'm always fighting that a little bit, because it's like
mhm,
I don't just
mhm,
like writing one thing. And that's why I loved writing this
mhm.
project because, like, literally the music was all over the place. Like,
Yeah, it
it
was.
was so much fun.
But it
It's
kinda had to be, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. And I think that's
Yeah.
what's cool about a documentary versus really any other genre. Because,
Narrative,
if you have like a
right.
dramedy or horror, like you're really focusing in one style. But like a documentary, it's all over and it's a lot of fun. So I love that. When you would get, I know like kind of pieces of music, when we were working on it, I was kind of delivering the first couple like, stems and kind of cues of the film. What were your initial like reactions and thoughts to it? And then how was that moving between like the, I guess, approval and kind of listening stage into the editor? What was that process kind of like?
I guess I should preface that by saying this is the first time that I've worked with a composer throughout the project. So in previous projects, I might, like, take a song or, like, they would, produce, like, maybe a couple of bars that I would sort of, mix and match throughout the project. This is also the longest project I've ever done or directed myself. So I should say that first. So for me, it was also kind of a new process too. But I can say that, like, from the first delivery, I spent a lot of time just listening to the soundtrack on its own. and trying to really hear it and like what comes up for me, like what do I imagine, just forgetting about the film for a moment, like
Mm.
what sounds and what do these feelings conjure for me. And then I would listen to it with the film with no dialogue. And then that sort of helped me see if I could like if that first preview that I did, if that matches with the visuals and the actual storytelling that we were doing in the film. And then places where I felt like there was tension, I noted that down and then sort of asked those open-ended questions to the production team and then the editor, like, what do you think about it? And by and large, like the places where there were tension were really just like things that seemed like they were maybe contrasting and like weren't they just had like you added a lot of unexpected layers, and for me, I really like that. I really like combining things that people don't expect into one place because it does make it more memorable. But just, a lot of directing too is just like getting out of your own head
Yeah.
and being like knowing when to ask for help and ask to say like, "Okay, can you just check this for me? Like, this is how I think of this, but I know I'm only one person." So,
Right.
that was a lot of it was, I did a lot of work on my own, processing all of the wonderful tracks that you had put together. And honestly, like the first few impressions I had was I was like, "Oh, I don't know if there's any notes." Like, I just really like all of this, and it was like doing all the things that it needed to do throughout the film of like controlling the feelings, but not too. Uh, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it sort of followed the narrative arc really well.
Okay.
And then when I finally started to Splice, who of course again always serves at that as that like fresh pair of eyes and ears, they were also like, this isn't like I think there isn't really that much that we need to fix. Like it really matches well. And so I think that was really affirming for me to know as far as the feedback process went. And I think we only didn't really well, I would love to hear from your side too, like from a lot of the other projects that you work on, how the back and forth went. If you felt like we were giving you a lot of feedback to sort of, filter through, or if it just felt kind of
No, I mean, honestly, like this is one of those projects for me that just kind of like, I don't know, I think we just meshed well. Like between like
yeah.
me, you, the editing and everything, it felt good. I think you gave really good direction. The playlist helps so much. And you're very like detailed and organized as a director as far as where we're at in the film. Here's where these go. Maybe this section, because you were still kind of editing, obviously, all along the
Right,
process.
yeah.
So I think for a director to be like really organized and going, hey, we need this for this part, but it may get cut, it may not. We may make it longer, we may make it shorter, but here's what we're going for. This part is locked, but it might move here. Those kinds of things really help a composer kind of nail it down. That organization and the playlist really help kind of like, okay, I've got a direction I can dive in and write. And you're able to
Mhm.
write without being scared of going, well, is this even in the ballpark? It's like, no, I kind of knew the ballpark. Let's just like really make it
Okay.
sound amazing and like kind of enhance it. And, for I think, the couple of cues at the beginning, it's like we knew we needed more ambient, some textures, maybe some cello. But
Mhm.
then we would have another part where, it was like Emmy, I think like when she was at the funeral home and kind of going to the library, we were able to kind of blend in, some slide guitar. It's a little bit of Memphis with some
Mhm.
traditional background. So I think things like that, I was able to be more confident because you gave really good direction and it was so well organized. So that helps a lot. We were both, I think, really on the same page. And I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of times I get from a lot of directors, it's like, I don't know, make it feel like I've literally had them say, like, make it feel more blue. And I'm like, man, I get that, but like, what am I doing? So
Right.
that detail organization, the notes, but I think that really helps when you have a large scale project like this because we did, and it's been a minute, but I think there was a delay for a while. So we did some writing. There was a little bit of a delay where you're like kind of hang off on the writing, and then we pick back up, and it's like, all right, it's go time. We got to get it.
Yeah.
How long was that delay? It was a couple of months,
I
right?
think it was around this time of the year and just making sure that, um we could sort of spend the time we needed to really review things instead of trying to do it piecemeal, because I know that's just never fun. There was a big break trying to push the editing further so that we could make sure by the time that we did like the second go around of edits with you, that we had somewhat of, we were closer to being locked
Yeah.
than we were the few months before. But the other thing I wanted to mention about the spreadsheets and stuff, like I said before, this was like the first time I've worked on something this big. And so part of it was just also my imposter syndrome at running overtime and being like, I need to be over prepared. I don't want to look like an idiot when I'm giving this direction because I need it to be good and I want to be effective. So I think I was also watching some YouTube videos like how to give good direction on sound and like trying to like make sure I was holding up my end of the bargain too. So it's very nice to hear that that paid off.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think, that's a big part of a composer's job is like no matter, because most directors are not going to be musical in any way or have a musical background. So no matter how they explain it to you, you've got to make them feel comfortable. They're the client, you're there to serve them. So you got to make them feel comfortable no
Right.
matter how they deliver that. But yeah, when as a director, you can be very clear and organized with the delivery of kind of what you're looking for. It makes the composer just that much more confident. And for any composers listening to this, you're not always going to get that. But it was really, really good. It just made me feel really comfortable. I'm like, I got it. I have a vision. I can dive in and start creating. So that was awesome. Speaking of that a little, what do you feel like other composers can do from a director's standpoint to really, how can they kind of build that trust? Everything from like delivery to kind of deadlines and things like that. Like, were there any concerns with like, hiring a composer and maybe them, because you're on a tight deadline as well with like editing. So how can that composer maybe build trust and help ease that side of the director's like fears?
I love this question a lot because it's allowing me to reflect on just the back and forth that you and I had, like outside of the creative work, just like the admin. I'll just speak personally, and then I think that can kind of help me give more general notes. But
Sure.
I'm someone who likes to lay it all out at the beginning as much as I can. I don't like surprises as time goes on, especially with something like this. So I do my best to like communicate as much as I can a lot at the beginning. And it for me, it says a lot. The way that that person responds to the details of my communication says a lot. So I felt like you were really prompt in responding to me, but also um, reflecting a lot of the notes that I had and just letting me know that, yeah, I hear you. I definitely see what you're talking about. The other thing that I really appreciated is I've intuited that I think you also did a lot of the similar solo work of just spending time with the content and trying to create your own relationship with the subject matter too. So it really, throughout the conversations we had, it really made me feel like, oh, you actually watched this or listened to what we were trying to say and picked up on your own conclusions about what the message should be too, in addition to the direction we gave. And I think that came out probably in the ways that we were talking about the work itself and doing the back and forth. So I also remember having a few phone conversations with you where we talked through pieces of the early composition that I had questions about. And I think in those, the way that you expressed like, oh, well, I think when Emmy says this, it feels like this should happen. And I think that kind of reflecting that you really knew material really well and you weren't just sort of like throwing things on top, that really gave me a lot of confidence in the work we were doing together.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think it's important for the like composer to like really care. Like if you take on a project just for money, like it's not worth doing, in my opinion. So I think for composers, if you're just taking on the project and it's not something you want to do, then you just shouldn't do it because like they're spending the money on you for you to make their art better. And if you're not caring about it like to the detail, because like I think the details matter. Like when somebody says something like,
Mhm.
what is the emotion? Like, what should the audience feel? You know, there was even some spots of the film, like there was one spot in particular. I don't think I've ever told you this, but where you were like being really vulnerable, like it was during the middle of the film where you were talking about
Mhm.
some of the kind of like hate crimes that were happening just with the like media and like misinformation in the media and stuff like that. And like you got really vulnerable for a minute. And like I was like, oh my God, that's like, even without music, I was like, that's like super powerful. I just got to quit playing music. And I think y'all ended up cutting it. And I hated that because it was so good. It was like, in the end, I think it worked out for the best. But like to me, like I remember sitting in the studio watching that, like you had started to tear up. And I was like, damn, I'm going to start crying. Like that was just so good, even
Aw.
without music. So I think, you
Yeah.
know, all of that is really important. You've got to really like get invested in it and care, or yeah, you just shouldn't do it.
That actually reminds me of another moment that I love. Every time I watch it, I'm like, "Oh, Tommy, so good." At the beginning of the film, when we transition from Emmy working in the library, and we do a match cut where she stands up in the dark library, and then all of a sudden she's in the cemetery. And in that moment, we're switching from the slide that you're talking about, that like gritty, like almost like it just feels really bluesy. And then we switch to the traditional instrumentation, but it becomes more, to me, it just sounds more like open ended and like there's almost ethereal vibe to it,
Yeah.
which I find really interesting when you think about a cemetery. But that is this turning point in the story where she's kind of just doing like something that she assumes is going to be really mundane, going to the
Yeah.
library to check out information, but it actually becomes this turning point and like opens up the entire story. So I felt like that was another moment that for me really clicked. And when I heard the music, I was like, yes, Tommy did his thing. And that's something that when we do screenings, it like revives my appreciation for your
So
talents.
I'm glad you told me that personally because, like, that particular week I was working on the cue, my wife thought I was like crazy. I was like going to music stores. I was like, I need to go buy a slide. And then she's like, where are you going now? I was like, I need to find a pawn shop. I need like a flute. So I was finding like pan flutes and stuff and just buying all this crap.
Wow.
And she's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? And I'm like, you know, because I was like, as much as I can in films like that, I like to record like real audio and like really get out of somewhat like, you know, stock instruments that are virtual as much as I can make it a real organic thing. So like I don't play slide guitar, but I'm like in here like doing all it and playing pan flute and like throwing it through reverb to get the texture. And she's like, whatever, you do you. But like I'll tell her that. She'll think that's interesting. So
Yes, yeah, and I guess that's kind of like when I first it goes back to what we were saying before. If you listen to the composition straight, like just straight through, it does feel like almost like a laboratory of all these different textures. So yeah, I really I like that a lot.
I'll tell you what, we'll end on that. Is there anything you want to say just in general about the film? I know that you've got it up on what is the streaming site it's on
It's
now?
yeah, so it's now streaming on
New Day.
newdayfilms.com, and that's just it's a platform that's basically the way I like to explain it to people is like it's like a Netflix for really badass documentaries. So
Yeah.
I really recommend going there to check out our documentary, but also like walk around in the site and see what other cool projects are going on there. We're also going to be on Canopy before the end of the year, so I
Nice.
think that's going to be really crucial for a lot of getting the film out into schools and classrooms and libraries. But otherwise, we're also trying to fundraise for an archive to preserve Emmy's work. And you can get more information on that by visiting our website at bluffcitychinese.com or following us on Instagram at Bluff City Chinese. So I think those are the ways that people can stay tuned. We still have a lot of programming that we're getting ready to do in 2026. So we're really excited about that. And otherwise, we're just excited to meet more creative people through the project and just make more connections and share the story.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I will have the link down in the video when it posts for New Day so that they can go and check that out and everything like that. But thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you.